Back in 2015, a little anime dropped on Netflix called Knights of Sidonia. It certainly wasn't the most popular anime on the platform, and it had the balls, the audacity, to be in 3D, which had 2D diehards mouth foaming on their PCs, angrily hacker typing about how the future of anime as a medium is forever doomed to be a shoddy Toy Story looking mess. But I liked it a lot. In fact, the first waifu statue me and my fiancé ever bought was a statue of placental Hoshijira. That's besides the point. Sidonia was cancelled after 2 seasons, and that was that. However, what most of us didn't know was that the anime was merely a step into a deeper world where only the most hardcore of Western otaku and apparently PewDiePie had trodden before. Sidonia comes from the twisted mind of one Tsutomu Nihei. And if you've watched through the show, which I recommend you do, or gone as far as to read the manga, it should already be clear to you that Nihei-san has some far-out ideas about the bounds of the universe and human potential. In Sidonia alone, we see characters that are well over 700 years old, but look like they're in their 20s. Genderless humans who change their sex to fit their partners for reproduction. Even people who no longer need to eat regularly and can photosynthesize, all whilst aboard a giant spaceship headed towards an existential alien threat in deep space. And Sidonia is soft, my dudes, like a nice down pillow compared to Nihei-san's other works. The man is a true Japanese science fiction writer with the graphical chops of H.R. Geiger. You see, there's another work of his that also landed on Netflix 2 years later in 2017. Blame, or Blam if you want to get all technical, but it is spelled B-L-A-M-E. Nihei does call it Blame, a film which, with no context, is a bit slow, super confusing, and it shows with its pretty terrible review scores sitting at an average of 5.7 out of 10 across multiple sites. When Tyler and I watched it, we were pretty underwhelmed, but thanks to the enthusiasm of one of our patrons, Crimson, and the fact that we had a job to do, we were introduced to a mangaka we would have otherwise completely overlooked, and a manga so incredible that I wanted to reread it the moment I finished. And a disjointed, complex, and lonely universe that could have only come from the twisted mind of one of the greatest science fiction graphic artists of our time, Tsutomu Nihei. And now, it's our pleasure to introduce that to you. This is Blame. Let's get into it. To tell you the truth, this video is one of a kind for our channel. This is the first time a sponsor has asked us to do a video on something that we knew literally nothing about. But now that I've read it, I get it. And I get why Figurama Collectors worked so hard to make the first ever licensed resin statue of Blame. If you haven't seen Figurama Collectors work before, they are the absolute best at what they do. Their pieces are literally unbelievable works of art, and their Blame statue is no different. We turn down sponsorships left and right because we are just not comfortable supporting companies that we don't like and aren't worth your time, and that's why Figurama is the only company we've ever done a direct sponsorship with so far on Bonsai Pop. This statue of Killy comes with swappable arms, including his unsheathed superstructure blade and a recoil arm from firing his GBE, plus swappable manga and anime heads for Killy. It also has LED effects on the base, which is super cool, and the mega structure has a molten glow to it. It's like they took a still frame from the manga and brought it to life in beautiful color. Pre-sales for this open on Saturday, March 27th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, so if you want this piece, make sure you set an alarm right now because Figurama Collectors pre-sales typically sell out within 1 or 2 hours or less, especially if your boys here are helping push that. So use code BPBKS to get $35 off of your final purchase. Link is in the description. And also, if you're worried about the price, they offer monthly payment plans to make their pieces affordable to almost anyone. Once again, I just want to thank Figurama Collectors for supporting us again. And there's a lot of YouTubers out there who get way more views than us, but the guys at Figurama really care about what type of content their statues are promoted on, and that's why they keep working with us. So thank you again so much, and get yourself an amazing piece of art. Now back to it. My dudes and lady dudes, you do not read Blame, you feel it. And that might sound cliche until you realize there is so little dialogue in the manga that there's no other way to experience it. Diving as far as I have into Nihei's works reopened my eyes to the potential of manga. I mentioned earlier that the Blame film is kind of underwhelming, but that's because it expects things out of you, namely having read the manga. Here in the West, Nihei has a cult following at best. However, the man has won multiple prestigious awards for his manga and is by no means someone to sneeze at. The film itself is more of a snapshot, a mere moment of time in the never-ending life of Killy. But you wouldn't know that from just watching it. You need more context to truly appreciate the movie for what it is. But we aren't exactly here to talk about the film. That's more of an addendum to the main focus, which is Nihei, Blame, and a few other works which followed after. Blame was released in 1997 and is touted as a science fiction masterpiece. And when I say science fiction, I do not mean Star Wars, Star Trek, light sci-fi with spaceships and laser guns. I mean deep, dark, dystopian and disturbing science fiction. The kind of sci-fi that gives you the nightmarish existential dread of the many possible devastating futures ahead for the human race. The closest thing we've come to covering something of this magnitude is Angel's Egg. So if you watched that, or at least seen our video on it, you may have a bit of an inkling as to how deep we're going to go here. However, I would like to make an important note though, for first timers of the series or any Nihei manga really, it's very difficult to truly spoil his works, especially Blame. We have in the past made comparisons to the Souls video game franchise by From Software and Miyazaki-san, and once again, we're kind of forced to here out of a lack of other comparable media. Blame is largely about feeling the atmosphere of the world and the various places within it. The characters and their goals are secondary to the setting, and any world building or lore is to be found only through visual hints or singular speech bubbles within well over 1,000 pages of panels. The world of Blame, the city, is a never-ending, continuously growing dead husk of a world. It's a sprawling, dark, empty, lifeless metropolis with no beginning or end, occupied only by the few handfuls of scattered, degenerated, desperate, and ignorant human tribes, as well as terrifying silicon life forms. There's also the spawned, mindless hunters who exist solely to eradicate everything and your occasional safeguard. If you are a Souls fan, Anor Londo is a good example of the empty feeling that comes from the winding paths and deserted corridors of the city. You can tell it used to be a huge, grand epitome of the power of gods, but now it's abandoned and hollow, protected only by those most loyal to the old system. However, the Tome of the Giants and the Catacombs are much more akin to the atmosphere. Much like Dark Souls, Blame benefits greatly with context. If you were to simply jump into the world of Souls, you'd likely become lost, frustrated, and like many, simply put it down forever. The same can easily be said about Blame. And nothing we say here is going to ruin your experience. Instead, we aim to heighten it. That being said, some people do like the challenge, so here is your out. If you want, go read the manga and come back if you're one of those people. Now, nothing in Blame is for 100% certain. It's much more of an experience again than a story. However, there are some important pieces, namely Killy, a man with a mission and an absurdly powerful gun, the gravitational beam emitter. However, Killy's mission is extremely obscure. He is looking for a human who carries the net terminal gene. That, my friends, is the entire story. No, seriously, everything else is extra. Blame is just Killy more or less wandering around an endless expanse of a dead city, dodging danger on a dogged quest to find anyone with the net terminal gene, let alone anyone at all. But it's the subtle nuances of that quest which turns Blame from looking like something that would make the Fellowship of the Ring jealous into a truly confounding and unique experience. The city, the setting, is beyond scope. Massive isn't even a concept that could scratch its size. The closest descriptor would be infinite. It's also completely nonsensical, ranging from massive open spaces 4.4 times the circumference of the planet Earth to tight, narrow, claustrophobic, beehive-like corridors with staircases leading to nowhere and labyrinthian passages that can change at a moment's notice. However, Killy walks on and on and on. And at this point, the question should be, how does one traverse such a large expanse? And the answer to that is very complicated, so let's go back to the closest thing to a start that we have. There is an extremely short prequel to Blame called Noise, which follows a character named Susanoo Musubi. During the time she was alive, the city is active and inhabited by humans, which obviously necessitates things like law enforcement, because with society comes crime. The city at this point is a thriving metropolis, home to trillions of people, yet is already tens of thousands of years old, possibly older. This utopian achievement is thanks to ancient humans creating the Netsphere, which is like a mix between a hyper-advanced internet and an unlimited 3D printer. It was created in order to solve all of the world's problems and was able to be accessed by those who had a biological mutation called the net terminal gene. Those with this gene chose to make this city a pure place where they could build by themselves and make all of their wishes come true. They then created the administration to oversee the Netsphere and the safeguard to protect it from intrusion or tampering. Megalithic robots called builders saw to the never-ending construction of the city, while populations skyrocketed as sickness, disease, and hunger disappeared from net terminal gene wielders. It's possible that during this time, due to the Safeguard's programming, they eradicated the rest of humanity who didn't hold the net terminal gene, but again, that's speculation. However, the city did eventually overtake the entire Earth and then began to branch out far into the solar system. It continued to build on top of itself, creating newer and bigger megastructures, the first megastructure being the Earth itself, whose raw materials were eventually excavated completely for further construction. Each megastructure is encased in a virtually indestructible plate created by infinitely folded computer chips, which allow the Netsphere to access the entirety of each strata. These megastructures also act as a security barrier between each strata and prevented trespassing or tampering. During this time, what constitutes as a human to us drastically changed. Genetic tampering, cybernetic implantation, augmented lifespans, anything was possible with the power of the Netsphere. Humans in different strata of the city evolved differently, making some incredibly tall while others became pygmy-like. And with that came a new but indeterminate definition of humanity. The only real piece of importance was the net terminal gene, allowing humans access to the Netsphere, which served not only as a lifeline, a ticket to immortality, but also proof of citizenship. However, during the time of Noise, a cult called the Order had risen from the shadows with the aim of pushing humanity into its next stage of evolution due to their belief in an entity within the Netsphere called the Net Chaos. The Order performed horrifying experiments on humans after stealing Safeguard technology from the Netsphere, which resulted in the first Silicon life. The main difference between humans and Silicon life is that instead of carbon, the latter's genomes are created with silicon. Their bodies are then later augmented, which turns them into these horrific monster-looking things. However, their existence flies in the face of Safeguard protocol. Think of Safeguard as the Netsphere cops. Silicon life forms don't have the net terminal gene, making them illegal aliens and thus subject to termination. Meanwhile, an inexplicable infection swept the human populace in every strata of the city, wiping out the net terminal gene from the human race. Some say this disease was caused by the Silicon life, but nobody really knows. But what it ended up with was the humans blocked out of the Netsphere, which caused the Safeguard to turn on them as well. No net terminal gene, no citizenship. The administration then lost control of the Netsphere and the city itself. The Safeguard went rogue and annihilated humans and Silicon life alike with the help of exterminators. The builder robots eventually became senile over millennia and continued to build the city without any direction. All of this resulting in the first panel of Blame, where we meet Killy. Now, I'd like to point out that none of what I've explained to you is ever directly stated. All of this information is put together by context clues, hints, big references, and none of it affects the story other than giving the person about to experience it some context of the universe they are arbitrarily dumped into. Mangaka Tsutomu Nihei is a man who decided to take the concept of a picture is worth 1,000 words and bring it to life within an utterly unique and dark apocalyptic cyber horror horror universe. Like Blame, many of his other works are exceptionally lacking in dialogue and instead find their voice through the visual narrative within vast settings and scenery. Even the movie adaptation of Blame is way too loose with its dialogue when compared to the source material. When Knights of Sidonia was made into an anime, it had to be modified to make it intelligible for the audience. And while this might seem like a limitation of the medium, people who get Blame, who understand what Nihei is trying to do, develop a cult-like respect for how he tells a story. To emulate his style in this video, I would need to reduce this script to about 10 sentences. But obviously that's just not possible to fully explain what makes Tsutomu and Blame exceptional and unequaled. And in the manga, the first thing you're going to notice besides the long periods of silence is going to be the environment of the city, which, even more than Kili, is the main character. Nihei studied architecture and quit his construction job to become a mangaka, and this is stupidly prevalent in every single one of his works. His best drawings are of buildings, massive landscapes, things that can evoke emotion not through character relationships or growth, but from sheer complexity or scale. His primary mode of storytelling is through architecture, and his characters are more like cameras that he can use to take the story from one place to the next. Because of this exceptionally unique and gifted way of drawing and storytelling, he doesn't need as much dialogue like most creators do. It's just not necessary when the setting is essentially the story itself, and dark fantasy, horror, apocalyptic stories fall into this space where a lack of dialogue is helpful in feeling the depression, the weight and desperation of the characters. In a sense, he uses his architectural knowledge to create an atmosphere that smothers his characters and in turn smothers the reader. Like I said earlier, you don't really read Blame, you just kind of feel it. He weighs you down with the feelings caught under the expanse of his setting, and his true mastery of architecture is shown in the way that he can twist it into something that is just visually unsettling. However, this does make the manga very difficult to speed read, aka harder to make a video on. It takes time looking at each page and understanding what's happening, unraveling the story through context clues. Neither Tyler or I had any idea what we were getting into when we took on this project. And then I ended up reading Blame, Knights of Sidonia, and Biomega in 6 days. The enjoyment of these works comes down to how the reader interprets them. If they understand the style of storytelling, or at least appreciate it, a lot of it isn't meant to be understood in the traditional sense, this world becomes a vast open nothingness that hangs on to hope by the barest of threads. Even hope may be a stretch. Now, one of the biggest issues that people have with Nihei is that his works are confusing. If you look at any of the comments on any of the manga sites, many of them are people complaining, saying, I don't get it. But the confusion he creates can actually be a good thing if it's looked at in the right lens. It invokes the same sense of being out of control that his characters embody. They are no more in control of or understanding of the world than the reader. And in that way, there's an instant and unusual connection to the characters, not based on who they are, but entirely around the pressures they feel. The need to use your imagination to fill in the actual literal voids in the plot make the story so much more personal than most manga. It's not about you or trying to connect with you, but because it's purposely vague, it almost tricks you into telling your own version of the story to yourself. And because you're essentially making part of the story yourself, the manga is really only as good as your imagination or your interest in it. So it does, in a way, ask a lot from its readers to create a clear relationship between what you're willing to put into it and what you're going to get out of it. However, I'm realizing 4 pages into this that I keep mentioning Kili, but not really giving you much to go on with him. And the reason for that is, like I stated before, there really isn't much to go on in the first place. Kili is a man of few words. He's a reactionary with one thing on his mind at all times: find a human with the netcode gene in order to fix the city. He's a standard-looking mid-20s male who only stands out because of his unique gun and his Playford outfit he doesn't even don until the last book in the series. He usually just looks pissed and then fires his gravitational beam emitter, which is his main tool. Think of the MIB's Noisy Cricket and then multiply it by 1 billion, and that's Kili's trusty pistol. Its beam is the only thing strong enough to punch through megastructures, and it may also warp space and time a bit, resulting in explosions when the two coalesce again. Not only that, but the beam can reach at least 75 kilometers away and will annihilate anything in its path. It sounds OP, but basically everything that's still functional within the city is OP, so it's more or less balanced out. Its major benefit is its ability to allow Kili to traverse stratums, which, for the record, is no meager feat. No one's even ever done it before. And at the very least, traversing stratums takes time. Vast amounts of time. Staggering amounts of time. Which is another common theme in Nihei's work. His use of these huge, insurmountable, hard to understand spans of time really helps to create this atmosphere of almost futility. It deepens the feeling of the characters feeling small and lost. Now for Kili, Nihei estimates that he's about 3,000 years old at the beginning of Blame, and that's at the beginning. However, that may only refer to the Kili we see in the manga. Like I said in the beginning, the definition of what makes somebody human in Blame is somewhat of a mystery. Kili adamantly refers to himself as human, however, he has a cybernetic skeleton, a heads-up display, is only seen eating once throughout his entire journey, he can heal himself, like literally reattach severed extremities healing, he's also super strong, and his official status is Provincial Safeguard. And what that means is also up for debate. There isn't even a link for the term on the wiki. So I posit that a Provincial Safeguard is a human given safeguard status without the programming which exists in the true safeguards. And if I didn't explain safeguards better before, basically they are robots, humans, it's kind of hard to say, that hunt human beings and silicon life forms. And the reason that they do that is because neither of the two species have the net terminal gene any longer, which is required to live in the city. And remember, at this point, the original safeguard has gone haywire and, like I said, is murdering everything, but Kili only kills silicon life forms, and he does it by choice, he doesn't have to. However, it is the only thing he derives pleasure from, and I actually noticed this while I was reading and then it was reaffirmed during my research, but Kili only smiles twice throughout the whole story, both times at the malicious destruction of silicon life. He also talks the least out of all the characters in the series, and his origins, again, are shaky at best. It's important to remember that your consciousness can be uploaded to the Netsphere. We actually see this happen multiple points in the manga, and it's very possible that Kili really was a fully organic human much longer ago than 3,000 years, and his personality just worked for the task the administration handed to him when he was remade with cybernetic enhancements. Regardless, neither him or the administration or we the readers know if there is a human left with the net terminal gene. And with the city being infinitely large, ironically, time is not of the essence. It's impossible to say how long a time period Blame itself spans, but it's likely hundreds, if not thousands of years from page 1 to the end. There's multiple instances of a 10-year time gap here, a 14-year time gap here. At one point, Kili walks a wasteland 175,000 kilometers wide, which at an average walking speed with no breaks at all would take a minimum of 4 years. However, these instances of vast amounts of time passing are barely mentioned, or up to you to calculate for yourself. And generally, they take place over a page flip without any explanation. In the grand scheme of things, they don't really mean anything to this never-changing hero in this never-ending world. It's also important to take some time to think about the silicon life. While existentially terrifying in appearance, they haven't really done anything wrong. They never asked to be created, instead were forced into existence by a cult thousands and thousands of years ago, and immediately were targeted by the Safeguard. They are by all definitions intelligent, autonomous life forms with their own hopes and dreams, but because the story is told from the perspective of humans, they're made out to be the bad guys. But in the end, they just want to continue their existence. They refer to Kili as the Calamity, and for them, he truly is. He has literally murdered hundreds, if not thousands of them. And the thing is, in order for Silicon Life to continue, the net terminal gene must not be found. Hence, the eradication of what's left of humanity is essential, lest the gene surface and the net sphere be fixed to target only the Silicon Life. The Silicon Life, while capable of reproduction, were originally just creations of humans, adding a sad and ironic twist to the story and painting Kili in a less heroic light, especially since he legitimately loves killing them so much. I would also be remiss not to mention Sibo or Sana-Khan, the former being Killy's main companion along his quest. However, delving into either of them beyond mentioning would lead to the only potential spoilers available, so I'm going to kind of gloss over that. Instead, I'd like to do something we haven't really had an opportunity to do on this channel before, and speculate. Nihei's works are open to interpretation, but there are some thin yet undeniable threads which tie at least 3 of them together, and that would be Blame and the aforementioned Knights of Sidonia, as well as a manga called Biomega. Though the wiki says all 3 manga exist in separate universes, having read them for the purpose of this video, that isn't stated anywhere by Nihei. In fact, the evidence to the contrary is far more accessible, the greatest piece being the existence of Toa Heavy Industries in all 3 series. In Blame, Toa Heavy Industries stands out as the only place within the city which remains autonomous from the administration. What exactly it is up for debate, whether it's some kind of vehicle or simply another astronomically large structure. It doesn't really matter for its purposes in the story. What's important is that due to its sovereignty, it's the most likely place where humans with the net terminal gene may exist. These people were known as the Planters, and the Electrofishers, who are featured prominently in the Blame film, are a splinter group from them. The AI which runs Toa Industries and Blame was fractured into 13 with a central governing AI in order to keep them from going insane over time like the builders in the larger expanse of the city. They also have a technology called forwarding, which is some kind of mix between teleportation and time travel. Regardless, it's arguably the most technologically advanced place within the city that we witness. Now, Biomega is another far future cyber horror sci-fi manga by Nihei in a very similar vein as Blame. Dropping 10 years later in 2007, it follows main protagonist Zuichi, who is basically Killy on a dope-ass motorcycle, except he works for Toa Heavy Industries. Now, Biomega takes place on Earth, and there's even a Mars within the story's solar system, so this is seemingly a bit of a stretch to connect the two. However, what Earth is can arguably be as up for debate as what a human is in Nihei's work. Regardless, Earth doesn't last long, and Zuichi is thrown thousands of years into the future after the Earth is warped into a multi-billion kilometer long, 100-kilometer wide tube of horror. And Biomega's relevance as a piece of this puzzle kind of ends there, but if you like Blame, definitely hit up Biomega, as it's very similar, twisted in its own unique way, and just insane. No, it is Knights of Sidonia, which really puts the 3 together in my opinion. Now, 1,000 years before that story takes place, Earth is assaulted and literally split in half by an alien race called Ghana. They're a kind of anthropomorphic horror space jellyfish type thing that can replicate weapons using a placenta, I don't know. Either way, they're bad. So in order to avoid the catastrophic destruction of their entire species, humanity takes off in humongous siege ships in order to find new hospitable planets to colonize. Now, how many of these siege ships exist is never stated, but it is said that there were multiple of them. And once again, on Sidonia, Toa Heavy Industries plays a significant role as the creators, manufacturers, and maintenance workers of the Mech Knights, which are used to protect Sidonia. Now, when it comes to the timeline, a lot of people like the theory that Biomega comes first, primarily because it seems to have happened on Earth, then Sidonia, then Blame is the last in the timeline. However, I don't find that particularly compelling. Sidonia is the only story of the 3 which has a solid, fleshed out origin story of humanity and Earth, whereas the other 2 do not. And very mild Sidonia spoilers here, the ship does make landfall for colonization, but also proceeds to take off again and search for more planets, leaving the colonization party behind. Let me also remind you that at this point, humanity has the ability to clone itself, genetically engineer itself, and is thousands of years more technologically advanced than it is right now. It's also likely that Toa Heavy Industries wasn't a singular entity on just Sidonia, but rather a company that was aboard all of the siege ships, which spread out into the universe. As the seed ships created colonies on hospitable planets, it's also very likely that members or even whole units of Toa Heavy Industries stayed with those colonies in order to help build up civilization. And if you look at Toa Heavy Industries in Blame, its structure is strikingly similar to how the interior of the Cydonia ship looks, as if that strata was built around a seed ship. Also, if we look at the bear technology, which I know sounds funny, that is very prevalent in Biomega, well, that technology was first created on the Cydonia. There's also the fact that in Cydonia, the gravitational beam emitter was a giant cannon that Toa Heavy Industries had just created, whereas in Blame, it has been reduced to the size of a pistol. However, it is the same weapon. And as most of us know, as technology progresses, generally, it becomes smaller. Now, I don't think that we're looking at a linear set of events between these three manga. Instead, I think we're looking at the origin with Cydonia, and then two separate post-colonization scenarios in different solar systems with Blame and Biomega. Now, of course, all of this is for the real nerds out there, and hopefully after reading you come back. But if you know the specifics about the main character of Cydonia, Nagate Tanikaze, and then make the realization that he looks startlingly similar to both Kili and Zuichi, even more questions arise. And I would personally love to hear your thoughts and ideas on all of this in the comments, please. I think this kind of speculation is super fun, and it's very rare that we're able to cover a series or a mangaka whose work is this open-ended. It's also important to me that I make these videos fun for people who are being introduced to something, and also for people who know a lot about what I'm talking about. However, if you haven't gotten into any of these series yet, I hope this video has piqued your interest. I would start with the manga, and I would also start with Blame in particular. The film on Netflix is best enjoyed after reading the manga, as it isn't a complete story, rather it's a snippet of Kili's very, very long journey with some artistic liberties. However, the gravity of it all won't hit the same without context. And although I'm trying my best, and even with visual representation here in this video, it is very difficult to explain the weight of Blame. It's something that you truly need to experience for yourself, and I sincerely hope that you do.
見てもらえたらいいなと思ってるし、とにかく、見てもらえるようになるといいですね。多くの人に。
Hey, don't you go anywhere, I got things to say. First of all, thank you for watching our video, I really appreciate that, that was cool of you. Second of all, make sure that you're setting those alarms for Saturday the 27th at 10 a.m. Eastern so you can get your hands on that awesome statue. Make sure that you follow the link in the description, use code BPBKS for $35 off that purchase. That would be awesome. Now, Bonsai Pop would be nothing without our patrons, so I want to shout out the super lucky patron of the week, Adrius Vale, and one of our Super Saiyan gods, Apple Conjurer, HR, and Chris. You guys, thank you so much for being part of the team, part of the crew. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, follow us on social media, just Google us. We're all over the place. We got a podcast, we got things going on, and we will be back in April with more videos. I will see you then. Thank you. My name is Mike. This is Bonsai Pop. I'll catch you later.